Be data-driven, know what you want, and do your best to achieve what you want.
Today, I'm speaking with Wendy Wu, the Chief Marketing Officer at SailPoint, an identity security leader in the cloud enterprise space.
Oftentimes, we focus on the business value more than the feature itself. Is the company secure? Is your employee being productive? It's focused on the business value and then address the rest.
How closely do you end up working with sales teams? I know that frequently there's almost like this dichotomy between marketing and sales.
For me, it's a partner of crime. For myself and for the business, we have to be on the same page. We have the same goal. We want to achieve the success for the business. And that makes me feel like marketing's job is very critical, and it's also very meaningful and rewarding. And when the pipeline rises,
Wendy Wu, thank you so much for joining us on the Top CMO podcast.
Hey, Jackson, thanks so much for having me here.
Absolutely. Fantastic to be with you. So for those who don't know, Wendy, you are the CMO of SailPoint. Tell us just really briefly, elevator pitch, what is SailPoint?
SailPoint, we provide an enterprise solution to help companies manage the access to all of their critical application and data. So put in another word, we help company understand who has access to what and what do their employees, contractors, or all the machines in their environment use these access for. Because our goal is to make sure you have a very secure environment and you have good control on who has access to what. So number one, you can secure your business. And number two, your employees are being productive in the way that they need to transform the business.
Wonderful. And you've been at SailPoint for almost 4 years now, is that right?
3.5.
3.5. Right on. Okay. We'll get a little bit more into SailPoint later in the show. But what I would love to hear to start out, Wendy, is how did you get into marketing?
So this has been a long journey since when I was even back in China. I originally grew up in China and came to the States for graduate study. When I was in China, I think I was doing an intern or a part-time job at AC Nelson. I was the translator for AC Nelson when they have a lot of multinational companies getting into China and trying to understand the local markets and their needs. So AC Nelson was doing a lot of market research for these foreign clients like P&G, those companies, right? And I, being a translator, was in the middle of everything. Every interview they do with the clients, their meeting with the local partners. So I was able to observe in person how those conversations can drive business decisions and how they take the interview feedback, the findings from these research studies to really make business decisions. That got me super intrigued. Then fast forward to after I came to the States, finished my graduate study, I was like thinking, hey, what do I do now? What, right now, what? And I had the luxury of joining Microsoft to be a public sector education marketing manager. But one day, it was, I think 1 week before I started on the job, I got a call from a guy and he said, hey, I'm your new boss. Your hiring manager is no longer here anymore. And by the way, I don't have a job for you. I'm like, what am I going to do? And I was so fortunate that my new boss was so open-minded. And he sat down with me and just said, hey, what are you interested in doing? What skills do you have? Because he knew nothing about me. And looking across all of the experience I've done at that point, very limited, I said, hey, I've done some market research, or I know how that was done from my previous intern job back in China. He said, that's interesting because we don't have someone doing market research for the public sector team I was part of. Why don't you take that on and start that as your first foray at Microsoft? So that got me into marketing officially as a market research manager.
I love that. And, one of the things that we talk to with guests on the show all the time is the importance of really understanding who it is that you're marketing to. And I love this kind of background in market research, informing marketing. Tell me about how that skill set impacts your thinking as a marketer even today.
So that, the early experience, and then later on at Google, CMO Lauren Tuhill, she's so big on you have to understand what's the customer needs, what problem they have. And then you marry that with all of the excitement from the product, the solution the company's building. The two, when you combine the customer and the product, that's when the magic happens. So that's the famous Lauren Hill equation I still keep in mind. And basically, one of the principles we have at SailPoint is to be customer obsessed. We have to understand from the very get go is what is their challenge today? What's the gap they're facing, and why would they need some solution like this one we're trying to bring to market, right? Only when you deeply understand their needs, the dynamics, the challenges they face, and the pattern they adopt to new solutions, then you can really tailor the marketing message, the product strategy, the go-to-market strategy to how the customer can resonate best with what you have to offer, right? So that's being one. And there is another important piece how I realized lately is customers' buying behavior are dramatically changing these days. In the old days, think about your experience to buy a car. What do? You walk into a dealer shop and then you say, hey, can you show me the cars? I want to test drive it. But these days, the buying behavior of our customers have dramatically changed. And a recent Gartner study tells us that 17% of the IT buyers, they spend time with the sales reps, but 40% of their time prior to a decision gets made is actually doing their own research. Think about it, right? If you don't recognize this change in the customer's behavior, how they're looking for the information, then you're going to sell to them in the way that's not the most efficient. So always keeping that in mind and paying attention to what the customers are actually doing is going to be critical to marketers these days.
That makes that makes perfect sense. One of the things that I'm thinking a lot about in an industry like yours is the fact that you have, on the one hand, your customer who's actually making a buying decision, but then you also have the actual end users, and they're not the same person frequently in with these types of products. And I've spoken with with marketers in SaaS spaces before who say, we do a great job of connecting with the customer or the decision maker, but we maybe haven't always taken the end user into account, and that can cause problems for us down the road when it comes to retention or renewal. Tell me a little bit about how you take that end user into account.
Yeah, and this is a great question. And, on the one hand, the buying committee, the dynamics of that, it's so complicated these days, right? We know at any given point, a company's not making the decision through just one or two people. There is actually a lot of other people getting involved in the buying decision cycles from, in our case, oftentimes it's the IT shop or the identity buyers. But then there are other influencers in the decision-making process, like the CFO, the chief accounting officer, or the compliance teams. And then there is also the developers, the identity admins, the IT admins. These people get to deal with the product that you eventually put in their environment. And you need to look into each of these persona. What is their particular pain point? And how is their interaction with the solution? Ultimately, how is the decision of acquiring this technology going to make their job easier, make their life easier? And how are they going to embrace the technology from a day-to-day standpoint, right? So it comes down to really tailor the messaging to address each persona. And there are other things we also it's not just messaging to them, but it's creating the experience that you can let them really get immersed around the benefits you can bring to them. For example, the developer community. It's such a critical asset to the entire ecosystem we built, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We want to interact with each other. If I have a colleague who's telling me, hey, go check out a solution, I would probably be more willing to try it out versus a vendor pitching me, right? So creating a community and have the people in the community be passionate about your solution, and they can create a sharing environment among themselves, that will just become so much effective in going a long way to help you get the word out to penetrate the target audience that eventually will lead to the business success for yourself.
That makes sense. Now, one of the things I'm curious about is when it comes to educating your champions within an organization with these big kind of SaaS and like enterprise sales, how closely do you end up working with sales teams? I know that frequently there's almost like this dichotomy between marketing and sales, and they're like often at loggerheads, right? How do you go about squaring that circle and bringing those teams together? And then how are you as a marketer thinking about equipping those sales teams for success?
Yeah, this is such a classic challenge, but also opportunity for marketing people. And oftentimes, you can see in company where things are not going as well as it should be, they're pointing fingers. When sales don't meet their quota, marketing's the one to take the hit because you guys didn't bring in the pipeline. And then marketing will flip it to say, we generated a pipeline. You guys didn't close the pipeline, right? So if you get caught in that, then it's really a time to take a step back, say, hey, what's going wrong? And for me personally, this is a priority for me. Wherever I go, which company I've done, I always make sure my sales counterpart is a key stakeholder for me. It's a partner of crime for myself and for the business. We have to be on the same page. And that starts with you creating the objective that both of the marketing and the sales teams are fully aligned. You cannot say marketing, our goal is just to pumping MQLs. And what if those MQL turns into nothing? It's just completely useless, right? And then for sales to say, I have the quota to meet marketing, you have to do this. But marketing, if our resources not set up for success, we wouldn't be able to deliver those goals. So I think goal setting and creating the alignment is the first step. And then the second step is to make sure we have very rigorous data tracking system that will show the progress you're making to achieve those goals that you and the sales team set up front. And then once we have the data that we feel like confident in, then be able to track the data, measure it, and be able to break it down to see if we do well, why do we do well, what's working, and vice versa. If our pipeline's still missing and marketing feel like we've done a lot, what is missing, right? Then you can start to have the accountability be spread across. Marketing's the first step, then our inside sales, the second step, then inside sales passing on to sales reps and SEs, right? Which link is broken that lead to the situation where we don't have enough pipeline or enough quota that we're able to close. I think once you show, hey, we have a part to play and it's also a team sport, have that mentality with the collaborative spirit, conversation becomes a lot easier. Right at SailPoint right now, I have the luxury of just having a partner, Gary, who just joined our company as chief sales officer. He's complete in that, mindset where it's all about collaboration. There is no finger pointing. We have the same goal. We want to achieve the success for the business, and that makes me feel like, yeah, marketing's job, it's very critical and it's also very meaningful and rewarding. And when the pipeline rises, we share the success with the sales team. When pipeline is down, we go and troubleshoot, right? And so then finger pointing becomes not relevant in that case because we share the same goals.
Amazing. So you're at Microsoft. You've just been hired on. Your hiring manager is gone. You have the opportunity to create your own job, and you sort of say, well, hey, I can do research. I have a background in that. And you use that as an on-ramp into product marketing. Tell me about that experience. Tell me about what happens next.
So I did market research for a couple of years. I would say that is super critical to how I think about business and marketing these days, because it taught me the discipline of using data and be able to get all the facts to help business drive decisions. Because a lot of my output of the research I did was to help our leaders in the business to make those critical decisions. So I was able to experience that. But having done that for a couple of years, I realized I don't want to just be the person collecting data, analyzing data, right? I want to become a true marketer myself. So I told my manager, I want to expand my scope or maybe just acquire the marketing skill, the core marketing skills to take on something different. And I was lucky again. My manager was very supportive, and I was given the responsibility to take on product marketing for the public safety solution and healthcare solutions on a team that I was part of. And that opened up a whole new chapter where I started to learn the real core marketing functions, right? From a positioning, messaging, creating assets, and building go-to-market plans. That just opened up a whole new chapter for myself.
And was that intimidating for you? You're making a leap into like marketing proper, and at a large company, right? An important business unit. Was that an intimidating change? Did that feel like you were really taking a risk?
Very intimidating, but also exciting at the same time. I was pretty fortunate because when I was recruited to Microsoft, I was put into this marketing leadership training. It's a 2-year rotation program where they give the fresh grads proper training about what you do. So that gave me a lot of framework, and I made lots of friends through that program. And then we just share ideas and help each other through that. But I also have, my managers and the other leaders on the team by my side. And they're like, yeah, just let us know what help you need. And those are some of the success examples we've done in the past. And this is, a playbook to some extent you can learn from. So all these resources, plus some, just extra time for myself, right, got me started into the job. And I consider, I feel very much, Microsoft did me a lot of benefit to shape my career in the early days. And yeah, that just has a long-term impact so far.
Now, we hear frequently from guests, especially those with an agency background, right, who end up going client side eventually, about the benefit of having an agency background because you're exposed to so many different marketers, because you're doing a tremendous volume of work, and because you kind of get to touch a lot of projects, and get a lot of kind of mentorship and guidance. It sounds to me almost like within Microsoft and a company of that scale, you almost have the advantage of having an internal agency that you're able to draw on. I mean, do you feel as though you gained almost like an agency-like experience in this large organization? Do you feel as though that kind of gave you some of that same?
Very much so. And at both Microsoft and Google, I was very lucky to have met with a ton of, just experts in different domains, whether it's the creative team or our events team. Like I clearly remember at Google, the events team was so phenomenal, right? They would put on the biggest, most creative events for the business, and like Google I/O, and I was personally seeing how they put on those, and those experience become part of my assets that now I can use to drive my business today. So having the luxury to meet with others and learn from each other is a huge part of what shaped who Wendy is today.
So you were at Microsoft for a number of years, and eventually you made the decision to move on. You joined Google. What happened? What kind of spurred that decision?
Yeah, so Google reached out to me as in early days, they were just starting to build their Google for Government business, and they're looking for someone to take on the state and local government marketing job. Me being at Microsoft for, I think it was 6, 7 years at that point in the public sector. And I've already moved to the Bay Area at that point. I became a good candidate for that job. I was super excited. Obviously, leaving Microsoft after that was a hard decision, but I felt like I was ready to take on something more challenging and, use what I've learned at Microsoft to help Google build the business from scratch. So my manager was the first hire on the government marketing team, and I was the second. He was doing federal, and I took on state local. Together with the sales leader they just hired at Google. So we basically built the whole state local marketing and business, right? From that point on, it was very exciting and rewarding experience.
And what was, you're coming into a new business within a large enterprise. What's kind of the first step? What are the first tasks you're tackling?
At that point, Google being a household name already, the time when I joined it, the challenge we have to deal with was why Google for government? I thought Google is an advertising business or a search engine. Like, what do you have to do with me, in the enterprise business, right? Because it was selling the Google enterprise applications to the government space, like the Google Doc, Gmail, Google Maps, those enterprise grade applications. So first thing we had to do is basically change the perception that Google is actually serious about investment in government to get that awareness and create a perception and understanding. Hey, we are making investment and we have innovation that really can help change the way you work was the biggest challenge and the first challenge we had to deal with back then. So we had a lot of fun, yeah, doing that.
And I imagine that government agencies and kind of municipalities are typically going to be resistant to change. I think oftentimes you're going to it's not a sector that's like known for innovation necessarily. Um, how do you go about changing perceptions and spurring kind of new behavior and adoption in a sector that is kind of notorious for its resistance to innovation and change?
You're spot on, Jackson. So what we came up with is we first just have to create this viral effect, letting customers know that actually there are successful business or organizations, agencies adopting Google so that it's legit, right? It has tangible business impact because we come from the standpoint where collaboration, real-time collaboration through Google Docs is becoming a real thing. Think about it's from all of the Microsoft attachments back and forth, different versions to collaborating on the same piece of sheet, right? And everyone's just getting much more productive. So that's kind of the product innovation. You now have to tell the story about how this innovation it's really changing the life about how business work or agencies work. We came up with this campaign called Gone Google. So and so have gone Google. You can see the city of LA has gone Google. The state of Wyoming has gone Google. The city of Pittsburgh has gone Google, or so and so a celebrity has gone Google. That become the whole slogan of the campaign, Gone Google campaign. And in my particular area, it's to tell the story how government agencies, those forward-looking agencies and their leaders are embracing this Gone Google vibe by switching their on-prem productivity suites to the cloud applications. And I clearly remember LA was the first city, being one of the largest cities, to say LA on Google. It's definitely an attention grabber. Then we move on to the states. Wyoming, you may not realize Wyoming, it's actually very, very forward looking. They're very advanced in how they look at innovation, right? So we work with the governor. I remember going to Wyoming on tiny plane and work with the governor and take videos about their celebration of the Gone Google moment and share those success broadly. And to the extent we can quantify what is their cost saving, how much they are saving time, all these benefits they are, and told through the voice of the governor of Wyoming and their CIOs. And then you broadly share those success stories in big ways, right? And those become a big momentum driver, creating the buzz and the awareness in the market. And then we continue on with the city of Boston, the city of Pittsburgh, and just a slew of the well-known customers we were able to acquire and then let them be the spokesperson for us versus us just making our own pitch. Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that back in the days.
I love that. And is there in that process of rolling out this, kind of product to a totally new customer set, were there any specific challenges or failures that come to mind that you encountered? Anything that really stood in the way of your success, or anything you tried that just didn't work?
Yeah, I would say this is kind of cloud was just becoming a thing back in the days. That's early 20. I joined Google 2011, right? So it's 2011, 2012-ish. It's just starting to gaining some attention, but there is a lot of wait and see in the market. There is a lot of question, is the cloud secure or not? Because now I'm not in control of this. I'm sharing this cloud tenant with many other companies. Is my data secure still, right? So there is the notion you have to change that, hey, the cloud is actually more secure than you think it is. It's more secure than what you have today. Like if there is a flood, your server might get damaged and then you lose all the data you have. But if it's in the cloud, it's not going to happen. So we just have to really work hard to help people understand it's okay to embrace the cloud. And if you don't do that, all the downside you're having, you're going to be left behind, right? Even though it's early, if you want to stay competitive, having all the competitive advantages, you need to embrace new things. And one of the ways we do, again, like through the voice of customers and really find those, the first movers who are very brave, and then through their lens, tell the people why the cloud is safe. And then also using the analyst to reinforce the message to say, yes, this is where the industry is going and get their attention. So slowly, but surely, people's notions start to change. And to date, no one ever questioned, is the cloud safe or not, right? That's just said by default, right? Cloud first, it's our mentality.
Sure. Now, I don't know anything about the governor of Wyoming in 2011, but I assume that oftentimes the end decision makers in this space are not technical, probably don't have a lot of background in, kind of understanding cybersecurity or data security. Do you go to great lengths to try to explain to them why this solution is better, more secure? Or are you really relying on, just kind of like here are all the great government agencies that are already doing this? I mean, or maybe it's a combination of things, but to what extent are you trying to like explain features to these decision makers, and to what extent are you really relying on reputational lift from other customers?
Like you said, it's a combination of all of these. And oftentimes we focus on the business value more than the feature itself. If you're truly talking about the highest decision makers, right? Let's say the board or the governor in this case, or the CEOs of the business, it's the business value that matter most to them. Like, is the company secure? Is your employee being productive? Are you meeting all the compliance requirements from a CFO standpoint, right? Those, we try to tackle these first, and those usually get the attention of these people way more than down to a feature function level, because they may not see the connection between a technical detail versus the business impact. And trying to focus on that with the top level decision makers, but then down below with the next layer, like the personas of the practitioners, you then focus on the feature functions. And oftentimes they will want validation. That's when you bring in, this is what other companies are doing, or this is what another governor is doing. And this just gets them much more willing to listen. And there is the fear of missing out, FOMO, right? And companies or agencies these days, they don't want to be left behind, and they want to catch up to the best practice that they're seeing in the industry. So oftentimes those references go a long way, and we may even facilitate those across different customers. Say, hey, we can set you up with the governor from Wyoming, right? You can hear directly from him. This is how this is helping his agency doing those. So I would say it's focused on the business value and then address the rest.
To what extent are you relying on relationships between agencies to make the product more attractive? So what I mean by this is, let's say the state police go Google, right? And now if they're sharing documents with, local police departments or sheriff's offices, it's like a lot easier for them if they're kind of operating within the same tool set. Did you think of it that way? Were you kind of saying like,
Absolutely. Yeah, and in the when I was at Google, one of the approach we took is to look at where IT is more centralized. For those agencies, it's a lot easier because then you can go in and address them all. That way, it just cascades down to the other departments and agencies a lot easier. Like I think state of Maryland was such an example. We went in with the central IT shop, and then they cascaded down to the other departments. But there are also kind of the land and expand approach that I also saw sometimes works. You get in like, because it's just so hard for them all to make a decision, and they're a bit distributed in the way they set up their decision making tree. So getting in with one or two agency and prove it works. Now the rest is more willing to listen, but it does take more efforts to get them one on one each on board, right? It takes longer time.
Now, how did you think about over the course of your time at Google? You were there for about 7 years. You had multiple promotions. How did you expand your role at Google, and how did you think about kind of career development at that time?
Yeah, so I joined Google as the state local government marketing manager. And my manager, who was running federal, left the business at one point. So I was able to take on government entirely as the first expansion. But having done that for, I think, 2, 3 years, I realized there is so much other opportunity at Google, but I was kind of just locking myself in the box of public sector and government. And plus the time I had at Microsoft, I had a baggage of 9, 10 years in public sector. It was a lot. It was deep domain expertise, but it's a double-edged sword. And public sector was all I had experience for. So at one point, I saw GCP, Google Cloud Platform, was emerging, and they're recruiting. They need someone to run the business in AMS. So I debated with myself, do I give up what I've developed in public sector, or do I just kind of stay focused and hope I become deeper an expert? But in the end, I chose to give up the public sector responsibility and apply to the GCP job. And I'm very, very glad to date I made that decision, because that completely opened up the entire commercial space outside of public sector for me, that I was able to take on the entire AMS field marketing for GCP back in the early days. So I was the first to hire in AMS, and building it from scratch with the early founders of GCP to build it just every step of the way, right? How do we build the marketing plan? How do we hire the team? How do we slowly get the product into the market? Because AWS and Microsoft was already the incumbents, and we're kind of the new kid on the block, right? Coming from behind. So that was a fun ride to step into that. And from there, my mind keeps churning again every couple of years, like what's next? And I saw myself, having done the AMS job, I said, probably it's time for me to take on global responsibility. And I proposed to my manager, I see Google Cloud growing so fast, and their regional teams are all doing their own thing, even though a lot of efforts could be repetitive or very similar. Why don't we get efficiency by putting in a central global marketing team, global programs team, that we can become the hub and then do a hub and spoke model where a lot of things can be rinsed and repeated. And I was, again, very lucky to have the support from the above to take on that role, which eventually allows me to expand the responsibility globally and learn about all the other geos.
So eventually you make the leap from Google to Box. And I see kind of a pattern here where you kind of continue to work in the same sort of cloud storage and cloud solutions space. Did you set out thinking that was what you were going to do? Or was it just sort of you had a series of opportunities fall in your lap, you develop more domain expertise, and you kind of continue along this same thread?
It's maybe a little bit both. I would say I definitely knew the SaaS is going to be the thing, and I was able to be part of the early Google Cloud. I see that being a benefit or advantage I have. And, at that point, Box came up, and it's to take on the global demand gen responsibility. And I see that as an expansion of the scope again, right? So I took the leap to Box at that point.
And how did you, sort of find the opportunity at Box, or did it find you?
They found me.
Right on. Well, tell me about that role. You made the move to being the VP of marketing at Box. Tell me a bit about what that was like for you.
So the responsibility was to manage demand gen, basically building all the pipeline for the whole business globally. It was a quite rewarding experience. I remember walking in, the business was just about to, they have challenges in demand gen, and the team has done some foundation work to set up all the tracking mechanism, like building the pipeline attribution model, all of that, which is very good start. But someone got to really take it on to have the business adopt this rhythm, right? And be able to create a cadence to say, how do we build pipeline? How do we analyze the pipeline? And how do we build like the gap plan when things are falling short, and someone who can have a holistic global view and put a strategy in place and partner with the sales side. So it was not an easy job. It's high stress. But it's highly rewarding as well. And I've learned a lot of rigorous way to look at pipeline that I'm still using it in my job today. And, a lot of the best practice I've acquired at Box, it's now put in place at SailPoint.
Now, a lot of our listeners, I think, will resonate with what you just said. Having a rewarding but high stress job with a lot of responsibility. How do you think about managing that stress? Like, how do you kind of keep yourself productive and fend off burnout?
People usually say find a work-life balance. I don't know if there's a better way to do than not doing that. For me, obviously there is clear priority in life, right? And I keep reminding myself, no matter what my job is, my top priority is my family. That is, something I always keep reminding. So meaning to say, if it's critical time for family commitment, I will always prioritize that, like kids' graduation or my daughter going to a sports tournament that's a big, like a national sports tournament, or going on a piano recital, right? Those moments, I feel like as part of her growth and my son's as well, I cannot miss those moments because I will regret those if I don't do it. So put those as my top priority. But then for the rest, I can make trade-offs. I don't have to drop off them on a daily basis because I can find, support system we can couple with other families. Those are the trade-offs I'm okay to make. So I can be committed to the work when I need to get onto those 6, 7 a.m. calls, right, on a regular basis. So you kind of know what matters to you most and you protect those. And then I also have conversation with my kids. I have a demanding job and I need to be present. So that's why I'm traveling a lot. And I, take on early calls or late calls. I couldn't be with you at every sports game, but for the big ones, I'll be there to support you. And getting their understanding and support is critical. And I was very lucky to have a very supportive husband. He takes on a lot of the kids' responsibilities, going to practice with them, or a lot of the pickup and drop offs, so I can focus on my work, right? So I think having that, it's important. And the other thing, I give myself permission on things. I wouldn't be perfect. Like I wouldn't be able to, like blow dry my hair every single day when I start 6 a.m. calls. I'm fine just pulling up a ponytail. I gave myself permission. I don't have to be perfect, right? And that way you can give yourself some space so that, because we're all human beings, there are the things we just have to make our choices and be okay with the rest.
That's a great point. And, Wendy, I resonate with it. I also don't blow dry my hair every day, believe it or not. So you spend a few years at Box, then you make the move over to SailPoint. Exciting move, I'm sure. And tell me about what motivated that and what the big challenges were you were looking to tackle when you got to SailPoint.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. When I joined SailPoint, I didn't really know much about the company. I was like, who is SailPoint, right? And through all the research, I realized it's actually a stellar company, and I call this the best kept secret. That it's such an amazing company from a product innovation standpoint, from the people standpoint, from the culture standpoint, and the growth is just through the roof, right? And I was telling myself, even though I didn't know about it, all of the data proof points and through the conversations I've had with the leadership team tell me this is a great opportunity. I will regret if I don't take it on. So that's how I decided to join SailPoint 3.5 years ago.
Well, and you raise an interesting point here where, you're at Microsoft, you're at Google, even Box to a large extent, like consumers have used these products, right? People interact with these products outside of their work frequently as well. So, kind of if you're getting in touch with them for a B2B sale, you're marketing with them for a B2B sale, you have the benefit of that built up brand equity. How do you think about kind of coming to a company that might not have that really broad brand equity and trust from other business lines? How do you tackle that?
That's actually one of the first things I took on after I joined SailPoint. Our goal is to make SailPoint a household name. I think we still have a long way to go, but we've made tremendous progress. And the thing that we always remind ourselves, it's at least we've already made the first step, is SailPoint. It's a well-known name within the security domain. We're the leader for identity security. Right now, it's on us to keep elevating that brand so that it becomes a household name, not just identity security, but an overall enterprise security. That is our aspiration, and we feel like we're making very good progress to achieving that goal.
Fantastic. Wendy, how would you feel about a lightning round?
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Wendy, what's the most important trait for a CMO to have?
Be data-driven.
What career advice do you have for aspiring CMOs?
Know what you want and do your best to achieve what you want.
If you could market for any brand other than SailPoint, which would it be?
Tesla.
That's a good answer. What is your favorite marketing book?
Zone to Win by Jeffrey Moore.
Where outside of marketing do you look for inspiration?
Travel and outdoor activities.
What is your favorite travel destination that you've been to?
Japan.
Any particular place in Japan?
Kyoto.
Right on. What's your favorite marketing campaign of all time?
One is Gone Google, which I said earlier. The other one is Dear Sophie, when Google introduced all the Gmail and Chrome. I don't know if you've heard about that campaign, Dear Sophie.
Right on. Anything we didn't discuss that we should have, Wendy?
I think you've covered all, Jackson.
Wonderful. Wendy Wu, thank you so much for joining us on the Top CMO podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Jackson.
This amazing episode was brought to you by Top Thought Leader. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.